Yeah. So specifically our journey was, we did more sales over Black Friday weekend than we had done in the 2 years preceding. So over a 3-day period, we sold more pillows than we did over 2 years. Obviously the biggest issue that presented itself to take care of right away was supply chain, right? How do you get from selling a pillow on Shopify to a customer?
On this episode of the Rich Ad Poor Ad podcast, we have Clark Bigler, CFO over at PillowCube. In this episode, Clark goes over 1, where do most e-commerce businesses fail? 2, understanding the cash flow cycle of a business. And 3, picking the right financial products for your business type. This is a really informational episode, y'all. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Welcome to another episode of the Rich Ad Poor Ad podcast. This is your host, Zach Johnson. And today we're talking about D2C pillows, consumer pillows. We're talking with the CFO of PillowCube. These guys are spending $900,000 a month last month, $1.1 million in this month on paid advertising. And I believe it's just like literally a pillow that is a cube. For those that, that sleep weird, I guess. I'd love to learn more, but Clark Bigler, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Explain to me the whole cube thing first, right? And you're the finance guy. I'm excited to talk to you. You're the second CFO we've had on the show. So normally on the show, we get into, rich ad, poor ad, and kind of save the financial goodies for last, but we're switching it up today. I'm excited to get into it, but you first have to explain to me, why would somebody want a square pillow?
Yeah. So if I could describe it, sum it up in a couple sentences, it's, everybody tries to make a pillow for everyone. And in doing so, they make a pillow for no one. So the PillowCube is specifically designed for side sleepers. It's a very high quality core memory foam. And the idea is that it really supports the neck and head of side sleepers. Turns out we have a very large demographic that sleep on their sides. But the idea is designing a pillow that is very comfortable for one particular sleeping position. Mm-hmm. And, of course, we're finding it's extremely popular and it does really, really well.
There you go. Product, you're going to also do product marketing. Sounds great. Sounds like a startup. So, cool. So tell everybody a little bit about, PillowCube's journey. It's pretty new. You guys have been scaling ads pretty aggressively. So give everybody a little bit of backstory on the business.
Yeah. So if I'm doing justice to the full backstory, our CEO, Jay Davis, and myself, we go back almost 15 years. We were friends in our undergraduates at BYU here in Utah. And we kind of went our separate ways after we graduated, did a decade of doing other things apart. And then about 4 years ago, he came back and he started an advertising agency and he asked me if I wanted to be a part of that. And, of course, love the creative side, even though I'm a finance guy. So we started an advertising agency. And then 2 years after that, Jay kept asking himself, hey, I'm helping everyone else do it. Why can't I do this on my own? And Jay's a taller guy, a bigger guy. He's about 6'3". And he's always had problems supporting his neck and getting a good night's rest. And so the first product and first company he wanted to launch direct to consumer was the PillowCube, really out of a desire to solve his own problem. And so kind of off of the back of our advertising agency, we launched PillowCube. All of our original content that pops up almost incessantly on everyone's Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Our interns and hourly employees at our advertising agency, all, not working for free. I guess we were paying them hourly at the time to make the content. But we made all of the content with our advertising agency and we hired them to manage kind of our ad spend and our growth. And it turns out that, because we kind of all have our roots in advertising, it did pretty well. it exploded our own direct to consumer brand, and we're sitting here today doing well.
That's awesome, man. All right. So you gave me the best analogy I think I've ever heard when it comes to funding and paying for ads. And maybe you could kind of share the analogy that you gave to me, and you probably are championing and explaining to everyone at PillowCube. But how would you describe the conundrum of scaling ads?
The analogy, the metaphor I gave you was very much like a dog. What does a dog do when it actually catches a car? Right. And that's a lot like our journey, right? Is we always talked about getting big and making it big, but very little conversation around what do we actually do when we're here? Because the journey is certainly it's not over. Once you're doing 1,000, 1,500 units a day of pillow sales, right? It's certainly not over. And it actually is when the real work begins. And so I think that was for us a kind of a small advertising agency that kind of converted into a PillowCube. The real journey began when we actually started selling these things like crazy. Because, my partner, I love him to death, Jay, he's an amazing strategic visionary. But what do you do when you're sitting on 5,000 back orders and, you're struggling to fulfill? That was kind of, I think, what the genesis of this conversation. And I think where a lot of e-commerce businesses end up failing is poor execution once they get in front of a solid customer base.
Mm-hmm. And is it fair to say that PillowCube experienced this in Q4 of last year?
Yeah, I think.
And so, what do you do? What's the short checklist here, right?
So specifically, our journey was, we did more sales over Black Friday weekend than we had done in the 2 years preceding. So over a 3-day period, we sold more pillows than we did over 2 years. So obviously the biggest issue that presented itself to take care of right away was supply chain, right? How do you get from selling a pillow on Shopify to a customer? And, we're still learning our lessons here. I would say that, if we've fully mastered the supply chain kind of enigma, then we're already ready to exit and move on to the next business. But I think the most important lesson we learned from supply chain, and this is just one of the execution pieces to running a successful business, was diversification. I think, we found some really good single source suppliers. And the pricing was great. The sales pitch was great. The contract was great. But we didn't have foam in our warehouse. So, at the end of the day, what ended up happening, and right now is an especially hard time to operate. For us during November, December last year, we had a lot of canceled orders because we had a ton of foam just sitting on boats floating outside of Long Beach. Could we have fully anticipated those problems? No, certainly not. But at least what I think Jay did really well from an executive standpoint, right? If we're talking specifically to CEOs who are managing their business, is early on Jay created a relationship and hired an amazing chief operating officer for supply chain. We hired one of my good friends now, Joey, from one of the large kind of essential oil MLMs that come out of Utah. That's going to get a good laugh because I'm from Utah now. I grew up in Southern California, but I'm from Utah now. And for whatever reason, Utah is like synonymous with essential oil MLMs. But we brought him in because he just has this massive international supply chain experience. And I think, being willing to, whether it be sacrifice, some options to a high level guy like that, or pay a salary that makes you a little bit uncomfortable, definitely pays dividends. Because you know what? There's nothing more expensive than unfulfilled orders. So that was kind of key. Step one for us is pushing Joey as a priority to be a part of our team. then second after that is kind of the cash flow requirements. I think that's the one where, as a CFO, everyone always talks to me about like, oh, how do I solve cash flow? And of course I have some good insights, but at the end of the day, it's like, you might as well ask me how to solve world hunger, right? It's an extremely complex set of variables.
Mm-hmm. So what is like the most, what's the best hack you think that you could come up with that, or tip you could give to another e-commerce businesses that is trying to solve for their cash flow needs?
Hire a good CFO.
All right, fair enough.
This is where I get to have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, right? Even though I've been involved and kind of in the ownership group since day one, I didn't make this was my side hustle up until February. I've been giving of my time freely for almost 4 years now, and I think it's one of the reasons why it's worked out so well for Jay is his ability to create these strong relationships with diverse backgrounds, diverse people, and have someone like me willing to provide him the feedback, the consulting, the service, without getting paid for such a long time. Can everybody do that? I don't know. Is that the right way to operate for every business? I also don't know. But it's worked really, really well for PillowCube because the double-edged sword in all this, right, is if you hire all these really expensive executives around you, you're also going to run out of cash flow, right? So it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think one of the things Jay and I did well is we would frequently meet together and we'd have open discussions on like, hey, what kind of revenue and profit numbers do we need to see before we can support like a minimal salary for me to come work here? And, I think that's a testament to Jay, really, in my opinion, why he's such a good CEO is he's not afraid to have those conversations. He's not afraid to speak candidly to a guy. And it's, even though he and I have been friends for so long, that's why I kind of set the table, is he was also not afraid to say, no, you're too expensive. And to have that candid conversation and find people that were more invested in the idea than a paycheck.
This episode is brought to you by Funnel Dash's Ad Card, the only charge card exclusively for your digital ad spend. And if you're an ad agency that manages 7 or even 8 figures a year in media and ad spend for your clients, and you're looking to double your profits over the next 6 to 12 months, then check out Ad Card. See, the typical agency model is this. You charge 10% of your spend, you make 10 to 20% margin at the end of the day. So that's really 1 to 2% of your client's spend that is profit in your business. The easiest way to double that is to really find a way to earn in that 1 to 2% cash back of the card that is on file of your client's ad account. And before Ad Card, what you had to do was invoice all your clients for their ad spend up front, which is really difficult on a cash flow basis and very difficult ask. And then you had to put the card on your own Amex or whatever card of choice to get that level of value back into your business. With Ad Card, it's entirely different and streamlined. You simply get your clients on Ad Card and make yourself the agency of record, and you'll get the cash back as long as you're managing the ad spend. It's a great way to double your profit without doing any additional work. Check it out at funneldash.com. All right. And what, outside of just telling you what your, D date is when you run out of cash, what's the single best tactic that your CFO or VP of finance can do for the company in the first 36 years?
It's really understanding. It's more bringing cash in, right? I think the biggest, when I work with CEOs, I think the hardest thing to fully grasp as a visionary and strategic guy is that a profitable business, if it's growing rapidly, runs out of cash very rapidly. In essence, what I'm saying is cash and accrual accounting are two different things. I know that seems very, very basic, but I've worked with CEOs where, I get asked the question, why do I have to pay taxes on things I haven't received cash for yet? And this was a CEO who was an MBA. And so I realized that was a very enlightening moment for me. I realized he doesn't really understand the difference between cash and accrual basis accounting. In essence, just because you've earned a profit doesn't mean you've been paid a full profit. And I know that seems so rudimentary and basic, but really understanding the nuance of those differences. And I would say a great CFO is going to come into a CEO and really help him understand his cash flow cycle. It's what are your streams of income and when exactly do you get those in your checking account? What are your outflows of cash and when exactly do they come out? That is an entirely set of different variables other than your accrual basis gain and loss. And a lot of small e-commerces may be a cash basis accounting system, and that's okay. It typically ends up being harsher on cash to be a cash basis accounting system for taxes. So I encouraged our company to go accrual, and then so a good CFO is going to sit down with our CEO, and I'm going to have the hard conversation of understanding the cash flow cycle. But then from there, also really understanding our different streams of revenue based influxes of cash. So that's going to be your debt and equity deals. It's going to be venture capital, private equity, and debt. Fortunately for PillowCube, we grew so fast, we went right from the friends and family investments directly to commercial lending, right? So because we grew 8,000% in 3 months, and so the banks aren't super thrilled to lend us money, but we have so much immediate cash flow that they are, and so we kind of jumped over the venture capital step. I think we were very fortunate. I'm not a big fan of that step. That's the step where you end up just squabbling over the valuation in your company. But having a great CFO is going to help you navigate your true cost of all those different capital options. Where equity is great because you don't have to service a monthly debt repayment. It ends up being way more expensive to you in the long run. And then debt, it's just there's now, even as a CFO, I'm just always finding new avenues to go the debt route. There's just a myriad of different ways to go down the debt financing route. In e-commerce, in my opinion, revenue-based lending is extremely, extremely attractive for a small company. It's just kind of high cash flow requirements, but it's just very low kind of recourse debt, right? You don't have to sign personal guarantees. Your owner's not signing his house and his assets to get it.
I think one of the mistakes I see people make is they pick the wrong, financial products for their business type. So you've got Divvy in your backyard right there in Utah, but you also have like a Brex or like a Ramp in the space. And like, I think, Brex or, Ramp, those guys are just doing with, cash underwriting, right? And so it's based on how much cash you have in the bank, right? And if you're a growing business, you are running out of cash. And so cash is great for funded startups, right? It's great for life sciences where there's high cash balances, but generally your fast growing companies that are growing by 20%, 30% month over month, or in your case like 8,000%, you have to somewhat pick like even the right card product or financial product that fits the assets that you have in your business.
Absolutely. It's all really understanding the products they're offering. I mean, there's what's really popular for e-commerce is kind of some asset-based products like inventory-based lending, which it's funny because for us, I would love to have the option to do some of that debt, but we can't keep a single product in inventory. So, when I'm chatting with people and they're looking at our financials, is your finished goods inventory really zero? I'm like, yeah. Because whatever we got that day is being shipped, that day. So, there's I've talked about revenue-based lending, which is really more, selling advanced receivables. It's actually not even technically considered debt. Those are great.
How do let's talk about that, right? Yes, so like who in the space, like, who are the top like 3 revenue-based financing companies, and how do you go about justifying the fee associated with those products? They're all fixed fee.
Yeah. So
a percentage of your revenue.
So, my background is underlying is in accounting. So I always live by a motto: if something is too good to be true, it's too good to be true. There's no such thing as too good to be true. You're going to have a give and take with all of your different debt products. So a classic debt from a bank, right? If I went down to the bank and I took out $1 million line of credit, it's going to be a much lower interest rate, but they're going to file a UCC filing on you, and they're going to own your first and last child. They're going to own your house, right? They own you with that debt. So cost of capital is extremely low, but you have a lot of giveaway there. Basically, you can't go out and get other debt. You would struggle working with private equity, right? You would struggle with the takeaway from that. Where revenue-based lending, the idea for those who don't understand, I realize a lot of people in e-commerce do. The principle of revenue-based lending is you advance me, let's say $1 million. I guarantee you back a certain percentage of my daily sales. In most cases, it's between 11 and 20% of your daily sales back, plus a fixed fee. So it's anywhere typically between 10 and 15 to 20% on top of the original amount loaned. So you give me $1 million, I pay you back 1.1 million based on 10 to 15 to 20% of my sales. That's the way it works. So it's a much, much higher cost of capital. It's even more expensive than just doing it on a credit card. But the reverse end is you're not traditionally encumbered like you are from leverage from a bank. It's the least amount of recourse you have to give to a company because they're going to get paid back a lot faster. They typically don't even really underwrite your company. They just ask for a set of financials and then they'll loan you money. So the answer, yeah, I know it's crazy. Because what they'll typically do is they'll get back end logins to your
who's they? Let's throw some names out there.
Yeah, the one we use, and I'll give them props. Maybe we can just be very direct. The company we use is Wayflyer. The reason why we use Wayflyer is they're willing to guarantee a payback period, which most revenue-based lenders aren't. So in essence, my guaranteed payback period is typically 7 to 12 months, which means if I'm doing more than the percentage of sales they sign me up for, they actually reduce the percentage of sales. And their annual percentage rate is around the 10% range, which is about a quarter of what other revenue-based lenders are.
Do that one more time. The annual percentage rate or the fee?
So basically,
very nuanced.
Yeah, being a finance guy, you can back into whatever an annual percentage rate is. The last deal I did with them was about 7 months at 6% fee. So that kind of backs me into just above 10% as my annual percentage rate on my debt, right?
7 months, 6% fee. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that what you have? Yeah.
Yeah. So
how do you do the math from 6 to 10? What's the mental?
Yeah. So the mental math is basically right. So it would just be 6% divided by 7/12.
Got it.
Yeah. So that gets you to what your annual percentage rate is.
There you go.
You put me on the spot, man. You were testing me to see if I'm not peeking out my ears.
That's a little basic math here.
I didn't realize this was going to be such a hard mathematical.
This is Rich Dad Poor Dad, man.
Yeah. You're making sure I'm not just BSing everybody, right?
That's so funny.
So we'd actually in the past we'd just Shopify Capital is probably the most prominent revenue-based lender that just because they're able to get in front of you so quickly because they are a function of Shopify. They worked great when we were small. In fact, they provided us under 100,000 in capital in the very beginning when we first did our Black Friday, which was great with almost no underwriting. They basically offered it because they had access to see our store. But when you kind of do the math, the same math we just talked through, their annual percentage rate was like 60%. So as you get larger, you get more options. That's why we went with Wayflyer, which is a London-based firm. There's several others that I've chatted with. I can't remember their names off the top of my head.
Wayflyer, they give you a couple options though, right?
Oh, like
it's kind of like how do they structure all the different options compared to?
So they're really flexible. They're willing to do almost anything you ask. With us, they basically offered us two options. They said, hey, we'll give you $1 million over 4 weeks. And if we do that, your fee will be 6%. Over 2 weeks, we'll give you $500,000 each week, but your fee will be like 6.5%.
Over 4 weeks.
Well, that's when they'll disperse the cash, right?
Our
payback period was a payback period of 7 months for both.
It won't let you draw it all down like day one. Is basically what they're getting at.
Yeah, that's kind of when I, negotiating, where if any feedback I got is they won't let me draw it all down day one. And typically I've found, though, if I need $1 million a day one, I need to be looking at a different debt vehicle other than a revenue-based loan. Mm-hmm. Right? Because I'm using a revenue-based loan so I can scale up my ad spend, which is a day-to-day gradual thing.
And why are they at 7 months? Like everyone else is at 6. What's the?
I don't know that there was anything special there other than that we asked for it.
Fair enough.
Like I said, it's an extremely accommodating. I've been impressed. I haven't had any negative experiences. And granted, typically in my career history, which is more in corporate finance, right? I came from a Goldman Sachs background and public accounting pedigree. I'm typically used to working with banks. The ability, we were funded within a week. We got our first $250,000 within a week of chatting with these guys on the first sales call. I'm used to taking 90 days to get cash from a financial institution.
How does that work with a London-based firm? I mean, do they just wire you the money, or do you get a virtual card, or
wired the money directly to our checking account?
All right, there you go.
I feel like this has become a sales pitch for Wayflyer, but
yeah, we're gonna get them to sponsor.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I better get some sort of.
Well, here's the thing, though. I think the way you're breaking all this stuff down, though, Clark, is actually your typical marketer on the show does not do all of this level of detail. The most, that most of our advertisers on the show, they're like, I have a winning campaign. I just spent $250,000 on it, but somehow I'm in a cash crunch 30, 60 days later. I thought my ROAS was phenomenal, right?
Yes.
And so then they're kind of just get me money in the door and not really thinking through all the nuances. So you're these questions are prying, but you're educating a ton here. One of the last questions I have, just to wrap up the Wayflyer front, is do they just automatically take a percentage of your sales daily or weekly, or what's the repayment? Yeah.
So the repayment is an automatic percentage of your sales daily. In order to sign a deal with an outfit like this, you have to allow them access to your store. There's no ifs, ands, or buts or ways around that. And typically they'll just take view only access, right? They don't need to make any modifications to your store, but they need to know what your sales are. And what's great about Wayflyers is ours is 11% until we hit our monthly cap. So basically, if you do the math, and I apologize for not having these numbers off the top of my head, right? Our total, it would just be whatever our total payout on the loan was, $1,060,000, right? On the assumptions we were using, and divide that by 7 months. Once we hit our monthly cap, they stop taking our 11% out that month. So because we grew so much last in March, they only ended up taking their payments 14 out of the 31 days of the month. We had half of the month where they weren't drawing from us because we'd already hit our cap. As far as I know, and I could be a bit ignorant in this field, that is the only revenue-based lender that's willing to cap. The rest will continue to eat away 11% of your sales until they get all of their funds back.
Yeah. And have you guys ever used ClearBank? I mean, I feel like I've heard their name more often.
I had a conversation with ClearBank, but again, they weren't willing to do the things like Wayflyer is, like the caps, and their interest rates are between 11 and 20%. I call them interest rate, but that's just their flat fee, right? So if you took out $1 million, they'd want 110,000 back as revenue.
Well, ClearBank kind of advertises 6%, right? But if you're gonna wire it out to the bank, that's where they get you.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, Clark, you've educated everybody on probably one of the more popular ways to fund their business. And you've educated everybody on how to really think about just how to structure a deal, right? How to walk into that door and that sales conversation educated with all the different levers to pull. Most everybody's just negotiating on rate, right? But there's a lot more to pull the trigger on. Any other thoughts that you would have for an e-commerce business that's looking to scale that you would, or any other tools or negotiation tactics with vendors that you would recommend?
Yeah, actually, you brought to mind a big thing. Having a strong negotiator for payment terms is going to be huge in your cash flow struggle. Frankly, as one of the things I found when I came in with PillowCube was one of the biggest things I could bring to the table from the beginning is calling up all of their vendors and saying, yeah, I'm not paying you. I'm not advancing cash to you anymore. That's not happening anymore. Because we take for granted, I came into PillowCube, right? Our fabric suppliers, our foam suppliers, our sewers, all of our vendors were expecting PillowCube to pay up front for services. I realize that's a hard conversation to have because basically we're asking them to be a bit of a bank for us. And it requires strong negotiation skills. And I'm not like a rude or mean guy, right? But going into those conversations saying, look, we have an amazing opportunity ahead of us. We're growing like crazy. You can either be a part of that or we can find somebody else. And so we need net 30 terms right now. It's a tough, difficult, uncomfortable conversation to have, but it will make a world of difference in your cash flow cycle.
So this is a little bit of negotiation tips 101 here from Clark, the walk away. Dude, you don't want to negotiate with you. I want it now and I want it all or nothing.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you can appreciate there's some nuance there, right? I'm not, like I said, going into the advice, I'm not saying I'm the type of guy that walks into every vendor and says, do or die. Because there's some vendors you can't do without. I think if you've read any of the popular negotiating books, the only way you're going to effectively negotiate is if you are willing to walk away. So, in my opinion, don't even bother negotiating unless you really do have other suppliers. But it goes back to our supply chain concepts I brought up in the beginning. You should be diversifying your supply chain anyways. I know that kind of cuts against, the classic Charles Deming from the 60s and 70s, which is single source supply everything. Unfortunately, in a global supply chain environment we live in, you have to have multiple suppliers. So it also helps you in the negotiation room and saying, look, if you don't want to be the guy, there will be someone out there to supply for me. Yeah. And there's a softer way to negotiate it too, which is you just ask the simple question. What do you need to see to offer me credit terms? And if they say there's nothing that can be there, then that's a supplier and vendor you don't want to work with. Because if they're not willing to change over time and kind of see a solid payment history, it's not someone you want to negotiate with anyways. And so I think that's been a huge part of executing for us is making sure that small things like that are negotiated. And typically for the strategic thinker, it's not really what you want to be doing from a day-to-day thing. You don't want to be calling vendors and giving them a hard time about their payment terms. So it's made a world of difference in our cash flow cycle, certainly.
That's awesome, man. Well, Clark, you've been an amazing guest. You're the first solo CFO to rock Rich Ad Poor Ad. I think this will be a breath of fresh air for everybody listening. Tell everybody a little bit how they can all support you and what you guys are up to at PillowCube.
So that's a great question. So PillowCube right now is we're still riding the success of our flagship product, which is the PillowCube and the PillowCube Pro. We recently just launched the PillowCubs, and the PillowCubs is our kids' line of pillows. I'm telling you, these things are so much fun. And not only that, they're a functional pillow for your children or the kids in your life if you don't have children. Essentially, it's our same design as the PillowCube Pro, but we're outfitting cases that are fun to play with. They're stuffed animals, but that are also functional pillows. Right now, we're just running our Kickstarter on the Cubs. So you can find us by looking for PillowCubs by PillowCube. Anticipate by Q3, Q4 that we'll have those for sale on our website as well. It's just PillowCube.com. And also, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're just looking for a life-changing pillow, go to PillowCube.com and buy one of our pillows.
Yeah, I'll even throw one out there, right? Which is, you got a lot of affiliates listening to the show and advertisers that are looking for offers that are working, right? That are scaling.
Yeah.
And, if you guys are listening and you're looking for, something that's scaling really well right now and you want to promote it on a performance basis, you go try to negotiate a payout with Clark. Good luck.
That's why I said I didn't want to come across as a mean guy because I always play good cop when Jay and I are in the same room. He gets to be bad cop.
Oh, there you go. All right. I like it, man. Well, thank you so much, Clark. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Zach. It's been fun.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Rich Ad Poor Ed podcast. If you're like me and listen to podcasts on the go ahead and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and richadpoored.com/podcast. And if you absolutely love the show, go ahead and leave a review and a comment, share with a friend. If you do, take a copy, screenshot of it, email me, Zach@funneldash.com, show me you left a review, and I'll give you a free copy of the Rich Ad Poor Ed book. To learn more about the book, go to richadpoored.com. To leave a review, go to richadpoored.com/review. Thanks again.